Purchasing power parity. By the end of this exercise, you should be able to explain the definition of PPP, why it is important, and how it can be calculated. The idea is that goods and services should be for sale at the same price as they are in another country. That you should be able to, like, an equivalent salary should buy the same amount of goods in separate countries. And the key phrase is a little bit over time, because there might be some short-term shocks or an event that has occurred, but for the most part, if you're getting paid to do one job in Canada and you get a salary for something, that same job and that same salary in the UK should be able to buy you the same amount of things. It's the law of one price. If markets are efficient, everything will cost the same once you factor in the exchange rates. And if you don't remember exchange rates, we watched that screencast about currency and exchange rates from the first unit. So let's start with a very, very local example. There's a hot dog vendor at Orchard View and Yonge, and then there is one at Roehampton and Yonge, and those vendors should show the same price. Because if one was significantly cheaper, since the products are identical, everyone would line up where it is cheaper. So although it's both sides of the street, they should have the same prices. Likewise, in countries, once we consider the exchange rate, everything should have the same price. But we know that's not the case, because there's different transportation costs. To get maple syrup to Australia, to use an extreme example, would have a lot of transportation costs. Countries have different policies on tariffs and taxes. Just the costs of wages, rent, energy. You'll look, if you want to take that hot dog example and do a real life exercise, note different prices around Toronto, and you'll notice as it gets downtown where prices are higher, where it can be more expensive to get the permit or the space to set your vehicle up, there is higher prices. And just, the supply and demand for the items. Some items are not as popular, or they're not as available. They could be scarce, and that might not every market is the same just yet. E-commerce is helping, and online shopping and showrooming is helping us, get towards one price, but we know that's not the case. A tongue-in-cheek way that The Economist, a magazine, tracks purchasing power parity is with the Big Mac index. And the idea is, well, what's the price of a Big Mac in different currencies? And then they convert it all into the US, and that gives you an idea of which country is the most expensive to live in. And the Big Mac works because it's a uniform product. It's widely available. In the book, it talks about Coke. A bottle of Coke is widely available and thus can be a good source of comparison. So, to do as an example, we would get the price. In CAD, a Big Mac's $5.69. In pound sterling, it's $3.35. And the exchange rate is 0.60. So 1 Canadian dollar will get you 0.06 pounds. 1 pound would get you $1.67. So we calculate the implied PPE. So we're evaluating the value of the Great Britain pound relative to the Canadian dollar. So in this case, the UK price will go first, divided by the Canadian price. So 3.35 divided by 5.69. So the implied PPE is 0.59. Now write it out carefully, because if you mix up the currencies, it could make sure it goes in the right order. So now to get the relative value, we're going to take the implied PPE minus the actual exchange rate divided by the actual exchange rate. And in this case, we ended up with a negative number, just the slightest difference, negative 0.01. And the percentage of that is negative 1.67%. And then we write a concluding statement. The pound was undervalued against the dollar by 1.67%. That's so close. You could almost say that they're comparable, that they're equal, that tomorrow the exchange rate could be slightly different, and it turns out that there is purchasing power parity. But that's just one product. So the activity asks you to do the same thing, but to add up a basket of items. With the consumer price index, they don't just do one product, they take a basket of different products that the average person would buy to give you an idea of what the cost of living is. So for this exercise, you take a typical basket, and they should be products that are commonly available, easily, it shouldn't be too specialized, and then you add up the values of the two baskets, and then when you start adding more items, it will give you a bigger sample size.